I'm Emily Rhodes, and I'm about to share with you a story that will haunt me for the rest of my life. It's a story about trust, betrayal, and a system designed to protect itself, no matter the cost. As I sit here, reflecting on the events that changed my life forever, I'm reminded of the countless times I've asked myself, how could this have happened? The answer, unfortunately, is more complex than I ever could have imagined. I was just 13 years old when I met him, Father Joran Malvaris. He was a priest, a man of God, or so I thought. We met at a youth convention, a place where kids like me were supposed to feel safe and inspired. He seemed like any other priest, friendly and approachable. I remember thinking that he was kind of cool, actually. He had this charismatic way about him that made you want to talk to him, to listen to what he had to say. As I look back, I realize that was all part of his plan. He was a master manipulator, a man who knew exactly how to get what he wanted. And what he wanted was me. I was vulnerable, naive, and completely trusting. I had no idea what was about to happen. No idea that my life was about to change in ways I couldn't even begin to imagine. It started with a simple conversation. He asked me about the book I was reading, and I told him all about it. He listened intently, nodding his head and smiling. I felt like I had found a friend, someone who actually cared about what I had to say. And then, he invited me into his office to grab a book. I thought nothing of it. Just a harmless gesture from a kind priest. But as soon as I walked into that office, I knew something was off. The room was dimly lit, and there was this eerie silence that made my skin crawl. He closed the door behind me, and I felt a sense of panic rising up inside. That's when I heard the sound of a zipper, a sound that will haunt me for the rest of my life. My first thought was that he had forgotten to zip up his pants, that it was just an embarrassing mistake. But then he turned to me, and I saw the look in his eyes. It was a look of pure lust, of desire. He told me to do something that I knew was wrong, something that made my skin crawl. I said no. I told him it was a sin. But he just kept going, his voice rising above mine. I remember feeling like I was in a nightmare, like I was trapped in some kind of twisted horror movie. I saw him take off his priestly collar, the symbol of his faith, and set it aside. In that moment, I knew that I was in grave danger. He was no longer a priest. He was a monster. The next few minutes are a blur, a mix of fear, panic, and confusion. I remember feeling like I was outside my body, watching myself from above. I saw him force me to do something that I never thought I'd do. Something that made me feel like I was dying inside. And then, it was over. He told me to get myself together, to act like nothing had happened. I ran out of that office, my heart racing, my mind reeling. I felt like I was going to throw up, like I was going to pass out. I couldn't believe what had just happened. I couldn't believe that a priest, a man of God, could do something so evil. The days that followed were a blur, a mix of fear, shame, and guilt. I didn't know what to do, who to turn to. I felt like I was all alone, like I was the only one who knew what had happened. And then I realized that I wasn't alone. There were other kids who had been through the same thing. As I began to open up to tell my story, I realized that I was part of something much bigger than myself. I was part of a system that was designed to protect the perpetrators, not the victims. The Catholic Church, the institution that was supposed to be my safe haven, was actually my worst enemy. They knew about Father Joran Malvaris, and they did nothing. They protected him, they covered up his crimes, and they silenced his victims. It was a conspiracy of silence, a conspiracy that went all the way to the top. As I look back, I realize that the betrayal was not just about Father Joran Malvaris. It was about the institution, the system that allowed him to get away with his crimes. It was about the bishops, the cardinals, and the Pope, all of whom knew about the abuse and did nothing. The trauma that I experienced has left scars, scars that will never fully heal. I have PTSD, I'm on medication, and I still have flashbacks. But I'm not a victim. I'm a survivor. I'm a survivor because I refuse to be silenced, because I refuse to be a part of the conspiracy. My story is not unique, unfortunately. There are thousands of others like me, others who have been abused by priests, by men of God, and there are thousands more who have been silenced, who have been forced to keep their secrets hidden. But I'm not keeping my secret hidden. I'm telling my story, and I'm telling it loud. I'm telling it because I want to make a difference, because I want to make sure that no one else has to go through what I went through. So, when you hear stories like mine, remember that the crime is only the beginning. The betrayal, the cover-up, the silence, that's the part that truly breaks a person's faith, not just in God, but in humanity itself. They knew, and they chose to protect him. That is the legacy of the Catholic Church's failure. And that is why I am still here, telling my story. As I finish my story, I want to leave you with a question. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Would you stay silent, or would you speak out? Would you protect the institution, or would you protect the child? The answer is not as simple as it seems. But one thing is certain. The truth will set you free. And I am free. Free to tell my story, free to be me. I hope that my story will inspire you to take action, to make a difference. I hope that it will inspire you to be a voice for the voiceless, to be an advocate for those who have been silenced. And I hope that it will inspire you to never give up, no matter what you're going through. Because in the end, it's not about the abuse, it's not about the trauma. It's about the resilience, the strength, and the courage to keep going, even in the face of adversity. It's about being a survivor, not a victim, and it's about telling your story no matter how hard it may be. So, thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being a part of my journey. And thank you for being a voice for the voiceless. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can create a world where children are safe, where children are protected, and where children are believed. I still remember the day I met Father Joran Malvaris like it was yesterday. It was at a youth convention, a place where I was supposed to feel safe and connected with my community. He was just another face in the crowd, a priest with a warm smile and an approachable demeanor. We exchanged a brief hello, and I didn't think much of it at the time. But looking back, I realized that was the beginning of a nightmare that would haunt me for years to come. As I reflect on that initial meeting, I'm struck by how normal it all seemed. Father Joran Malvaris was just a priest, doing his job, and I was just a teenager, trying to find my place in the world. There was no warning, no sign of the monster hiding in plain sight. He seemed like any other priest I had met before, kind, gentle, and genuinely interested in helping others. But as I got to know him better, I began to notice little things that didn't quite add up. It started with small conversations, innocent enough, but always leaving me with a sense of unease. He would ask me about my interests, my friends, and my family, but there was always an undercurrent of something more, something that I couldn't quite put my finger on. I brushed it off as mere paranoia, but the feeling persisted, and then one day he invited me into his office to grab a book. It felt harmless, just a friendly gesture from a priest who wanted to help me with my studies. As I walked into his office, I was struck by the sense of calm that permeated the space. It was a cozy room, filled with books and comfortable furniture, and for a moment, I felt at ease. But as I sat down on the love seat, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. Father Joran Malvaris seemed nervous, fidgety, and his eyes kept darting around the room as if he was searching for something. I tried to brush it off as mere nerves, but the sensation only intensified as the minutes ticked by. There was a sense of tension in the air, a sense of anticipation that I couldn't quite explain. It was as if I was waiting for something to happen, but I didn't know what. And then, without warning, it did. The sound of a zipper, the rustle of clothes, and suddenly my world was turned upside down. I was faced with a reality that I couldn't comprehend, a reality that would change me forever. As I look back on that moment, I'm struck by the sheer horror of it all. The man who was supposed to be my spiritual guide, my confidant, and my friend had turned out to be a monster. He had hidden behind a mask of kindness and compassion, all the while concealing a dark and sinister truth. And I, a naive and trusting teenager, had fallen prey to his deceit. The days and weeks that followed were a blur of emotions, a roller coaster of fear, anxiety, and confusion. I didn't know what to do, who to turn to, or how to process the trauma that I had experienced. All I knew was that I had to keep it a secret, that I had to hide the truth from the world. And so, I did. I locked it away, deep inside my heart, and tried to move on with my life. But the memories lingered, haunting me like a ghost. They crept into my dreams, my waking thoughts, and my every waking moment. I couldn't escape them, no matter how hard I tried. And as the years went by, the pain only intensified, until it became a constant companion, a reminder of the trauma that I had endured. It's only now, as I look back on those events, that I realize the true extent of the damage that was done. The betrayal, the cover-up, the silence, it all took a toll on my mental health, my relationships, and my very sense of self. I'm still trying to come to terms with it all, still trying to heal and move on. But it's a journey, not a destination, and one that I will continue to travel for the rest of my life. As I share my story with you, I want you to know that it's not just about me. It's about all the others who have suffered in silence, who have been betrayed by those they trusted, and who have been left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. It's about the institutions that have failed us, the systems that have protected the perpetrators, and the cultures that have enabled the abuse. It's a story of trauma, of pain, and of resilience. It's a story of how one person can make a difference, of how one voice can be heard, and of how one survivor can rise above the ashes of their past. It's a story that I hope will inspire you, will motivate you, and will give you the courage to speak out against injustice, to stand up for what is right, and to never give up, no matter what. So, as I conclude this part of my story, I want to leave you with a question. What will you do with this knowledge? Will you use it to make a difference, to create change, and to bring hope to those who have been hurt? Or will you turn a blind eye, pretend it doesn't exist, and allow the status quo to continue? The choice is yours, but I hope that you will join me on this journey, that you will stand with me, and that together, we can create a world where survivors are believed, where perpetrators are held accountable, and where justice is served. I'm still trying to process the events that unfolded in Father Joran Malveris's office. It's a memory that's etched in my mind like a scar, a constant reminder of the trauma I endured. As I sat on that love seat, I felt a sense of unease, but I couldn't quite put my finger on why. It was as if my mind was trying to warn me, but my body was frozen in place. The sound of the zipper is still seared into my memory. It's a sound that makes my skin crawl, a sound that transports me back to that moment of pure terror. I remember thinking that it was just a mistake, that Father Joran Malveris had simply forgotten to zip up his pants. But deep down, I knew that something was off. As he turned to face me, I saw the look in his eyes. It was a look of lust, of desire, of pure evil. I tried to speak, to tell him to stop, but my voice was caught in my throat. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or speak. It was as if I was trapped in a nightmare, with no escape. The next few minutes are a blur. I remember feeling a sense of numbness, as if I was watching myself from outside my body. I saw Father Joran Malveris's face, twisted in a grotesque grimace, as he forced me to perform oral sex. I felt his hands on my body, touching me in places that no one should ever touch. I felt his weight on top of me, crushing me, suffocating me. And then, it was over. He pulled away, leaving me feeling broken, shattered, and lost. I was on the floor, my body trembling with fear, my mind reeling with shock. I remember the smell of his sweat on my skin, the taste of his saliva in my mouth. It's a memory that I'll never be able to erase, a memory that haunts me to this day. As I stumbled out of his office, I felt like I was walking through a fog. Everything seemed distant, muffled, as if I was underwater. I couldn't hear anything, couldn't see anything, couldn't feel anything except the numbness that had taken over my body. It was as if I was in a state of shock, unable to process what had just happened. I ran to the school, trying to escape the horror of what I had just experienced, but I couldn't escape the memories, the feelings, the sensations that lingered long after the assault was over. I was trapped in a living nightmare, with no way out. The days that followed are a blur. I remember feeling like I was living in a dream that I couldn't wake up from. I was going through the motions, pretending to be okay, but inside, I was dying. I was dying from the shame, the guilt, the fear that had taken over my life. I instantly lost my voice. I was silent. I was so afraid. Father Joran Malveris had made threats that I knew he would carry out if I ever told anyone what had happened. I was trapped in a prison of silence, unable to speak, unable to scream, unable to cry out for help. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, I knew that I had to find my voice. I had to speak out, to tell someone what had happened. I had to break the silence, to shatter the chains that bound me to my secrets. It was the only way I could heal, the only way I could move on. Looking back, I realized that the assault was just the beginning. It was the start of a long, painful journey, a journey that would take me to the depths of hell and back. But it was also the start of a journey of healing, of recovery, of finding my voice. It was the start of a journey that would lead me to where I am today, a journey that would teach me the value of courage, of resilience, of the human spirit. As I reflect on those events, I'm reminded of the power of silence. Silence can be a powerful tool, a tool that can be used to protect or to harm. In my case, silence was used to harm, to silence me, to trap me in a prison of fear and shame. But I've learned that silence can also be broken, that it can be shattered by the power of the human voice. I've learned that my voice is powerful, that it can be used to heal, to inspire, to uplift. I've learned that my story is not unique, that there are countless others who have suffered in silence, who have been trapped in a prison of fear and shame. But I've also learned that there is hope, that there is a way out, that there is a way to break the silence and to find your voice. And so I'll continue to speak out, to tell my story, to break the silence. I'll continue to use my voice, to inspire others, to uplift those who have been trapped in a prison of fear and shame. I'll continue to be a beacon of hope, a reminder that there is a way out, that there is a way to heal, to recover, to find your voice. The days after the abuse were a blur, but the fear was sharp. At just 13, I carried a secret that felt too heavy for a child. Father Joran's threats kept me silent, and the world around me went on as if nothing was wrong. I watched people laugh and live while I struggled to breathe under the weight of what he'd done. Seeing him walk the church halls, smiling, protected, was unbearable. And when I finally spoke up, the institution I trusted failed me. They dismissed me, shielded him, and proved that their reputation mattered more than a child's safety. The trauma stayed with me. The PTSD, the flashbacks, the hypervigilance, they became part of my life. I'm not the same person I was before, but I've learned to survive, to cope, and to reclaim pieces of myself. Speaking out became my path to healing. In sharing my story, I discovered others like me, survivors who were silenced, ignored, and betrayed. Together, we found strength in our voices. My story isn't just about what happened to me, it's about the system that protected an abuser, the silence that allowed harm to continue, and the importance of demanding accountability. They knew, and they still protected him. That betrayal is why I continue to speak, so others don't have to suffer in silence.